Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having interest in the topic that I'm speaking about. I am Steve Wolfson, a longtime evolutionary astrologer, and what I would add to that, an awakening soul in the changes that we're all experiencing, which is really what I'm speaking about today. And my basic intro is that on this channel, there is an amazing wealth of talented evolutionary astrologers and an incredible amount of information about how to use what evolutionary astrology is and how to use it. What I'm focusing on more and more is because that, to me, is pretty well, it's covered quite well. Doesn't mean there's not room for more, but it's covered quite well. I am increasingly finding myself focusing on how do we apply this information. We're learning from evolutionary astrology, what is my life purpose, what kind of transits am I going to be having, and even how am I going to actualize this information that I'm taking in about myself. And my point is that we tend to look at it, our picture of ourself tends to be somewhat linear. You know, I was born, I've gone through all this, here I am, and it goes on. What I'm saying is that the very ground beneath our feet, so to speak, consciousness-wise, is shifting. That we, not only people interested in evolutionary astrology, but everyone, we are undergoing an awakening process, which is shifting the context. I was discussing with a friend earlier last week, I guess, about how evolutionary astrology has been described as the lens through which you can see things. And I made the point that what I'm looking at or working with is what is the lens through which I view the lens. In other words, what is my frame of reality of who I am? What is the point of all of this? Which the lens of evolutionary astrology is shining light on. Because to me, the lens is very much shifting. What I had written in the write-up about this talk is called Pluto is Transformation. Everything is always changing. And the essence of what I'm talking about is that most people that I've ever met, essentially from the time they were born, not necessarily instructed in the words I'm about to use, but it kind of boils down to that we want to hang on to anything and everything that we can for as long as we can, because life in many ways can be dangerous, scary. How do I know I'm going to have tomorrow what I have today? People go away, circumstances change, all this. And so we have been taught by people who care about us, who themselves were taught by people who cared about them, that hold on to what you got. Our nervous systems have experienced enough trauma, enough insecurity, enough uncertainty, enough betrayal, enough things showing up out of the blue that haven't been fun, that on subconscious levels, we have places within us when certain stimuli start potentially occurring, or even a whiff of a scent of things that have occurred. These go off like, watch out, watch out, watch out. And when you delve down into the subconscious level, the deepest fear of the organism, which we are, is that if it doesn't pay attention or do the right thing, it might die. To the organism, that's the worst thing. Now, this is looking at life from the perspective of personality, which at this point in time, the great majority of us spend most of our life looking at life from that perspective. I say there's an alternative perspective, which is not just being a person who has a soul, which is the essence of evolutionary astrology, but actually being a soul who has created a person as a vehicle to have certain kind of experiences or participate in certain kinds of things. For most of us at this point, that is more theoretical than hour-to-hour practical. What I experience happening and say is coming is that more and more people, we are being transported or brought into that awareness or consciousness of soul as our essence. So it's not so much as much about, well, I'm a person and the person wants this and doesn't want that and gets to decide what's going to happen and so forth. And rather, I'm a soul, I have an essence, and I am the essence. I have created this persona. I have put myself in a physical form at this time, as a man, as a woman, whatever, for reasons. And these reasons are beyond the capacity of the persona, the personality, the one we identify with, to deeply understand, to get more than a fraction of at any given time. Now, our egos, our personalities, like little kids, want to be in charge. Little kids is a really good example. They want to be in charge. We can even believe we're in charge. Like little kids can believe they're doing stuff, you know, I'm in charge, I'm making this happen, and so forth, while the parents are working behind the scenes, making all that possible and happening. It's not wrong that the kids feel that way, but it's a stage of awareness. This is changing. I see more and more. We don't have full control over what happens in our life, that I can make anything happen that I want. And that's not bad. It's that there's a setup. That's not a good way to say it because it has negative connotations. I don't mean it that way. There is a plan. There's a life plan of what's going to transpire. And the source of that plan is beyond what we can be consciously aware of most of the time, at this point in time. And our ego, our personality selves keep bumping into that limit, and we don't like it. I want my life to be the way I want my life to be. I know what's going to make me happy. I know what I want. I know where I want to go. Now, the issue with that is, think about this. There have been times in most or all people's lives when life actually has gone the way that the person wanted it to go. And how often do we wind up in that space with what we sought and yearned for, and then discover it's really different than what I thought it was going to be. And I'm still not happy. I'm still not satisfied. I'm still thinking about what I want next or where I want to go next. So the gist of it is the growing realization that my happiness, my contentment, my fulfillment seems like it's not going to come from external stuff. Activities, relationships, possessions. There's nothing wrong with activities, possessions, relationships, but perhaps what they represent is something different than what most of us have been taught and have believed they represent. Now, there's a certain amount of disappointment and disillusionment that can arise from these experiences. I worked so hard for this, and I've got it, and it's not what I think. And then one of the places many of us go to, I have at times, well, whose fault is this? In other words, instead of really feeling the feelings of the disappointment and the realization that, well, it's not that it was wrong for me to pursue this, because it's brought me to this place of realizing it's not what I thought it was going to be, so it must be something else. So I can either try to find somebody to blame, that it's they did this or that, or didn't do this or that, and that's why it didn't work out the way I thought it was going to, so therefore it still would have been okay if it worked out that way, so it's their fault. I don't have anything to do with it. Or at a certain point, after enough disappointments, to start realizing that maybe those things that I've been looking at, chasing, dreaming of externally never really were the point in the first place, but I didn't get that. And it's taken all of this for me to get here. The way most of us are programmed, and this is the way most of us are programmed, is whenever we see something, especially spiritually oriented and sensitive people, whenever we see something that I didn't know or understand before, but I do now, one of the first places to go with it is to beat myself up with this new information. I should have known this last week, last year, when I was 11 years old, whatever. In other words, we use the expansion of awareness and consciousness as weapons against ourselves. This is the pattern that we are working to change. This is unconsciously where this is where the peace inside, the acceptance of what's going on, of everything, anything and everything that's going on comes from. And we don't know how to do this. All of us don't know how to do this because we've never been exposed to it. So it's something that we're learning. And the gist of it is, I am finding that as the feelings come up of disappointment, even of feelings I don't want to feel, of anger, maybe I am blaming somebody. Maybe I realize I'm blaming somebody. Maybe I'm feeling jealous. Maybe I'm feeling emotions coming up in me that are so far away from where I want to be or what I want to feel that I kind of exile them, down the street someplace. They're cut out of me. I want nothing to do with them. They're not mine. Look at that person over there. Look what they're doing, which just happens to correlate to what I'm feeling about myself that I'm not owning. So that the gist of all of this is the new perspective for me is the realization that, like little kids, we haven't really ever done anything wrong. Like little kids, we've been learning. And it's easy once you know something to think like, well, I should have known this, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. Why didn't anybody ever tell me about this and all that? But that's more of the same old. The gist of it, let me go on to the next premise here and what I'm talking about. What I've just been describing is kind of the human condition at this time and the way that we tend to relate to it. So the second part, what I wrote about, is everything in the universe is in continual movement and change. Electrons spin, galaxies revolve. Seasons on Earth, seasons change. Days get longer and shorter, hotter and colder. Presidents change, fashions change, people are born, others die, technology changes. And yet, because of our conditioning, programming, and traumatic experiences, most of us feel unsettled or uncertain when things start to change, or when we see that Pluto transit coming in our chart, or Uranus transit, or whatever our particular Scorpio, whatever our particular bugaboo is about what we're afraid of the changes that it might bring about. And we have whole patterns we get into. So the gist of this, my point is, everything in the universe is changing all the time, yet humanity has been trained, conditioned, programmed to, in general, fear change and yearn for sameness. In other words, we're out of sync. The way we have been trained is out of sync with the way life is simply unfolding every second of every day, of every year, of every century. This, again, is not bad. It's kind of like noticing, oh, this is what's going on. One thing I notice, as I find within myself, the what I would call upgrades of experiencing tidbit by tidbit a little more of looking at life from the soul perspective, which alternates, is not my majority state at this point, but it's definitely growing. From that perspective, there's no fear of anything. It's not that I don't feel fear. The organ, my body, my experiences feel fear. But the gist of it is, from that perspective, nothing bad or wrong can happen. If you're going to die the most horrible, mutilated death, this cannot occur if it's not serving your evolution. It doesn't mean it would be fun. It's not something to look forward to, but it kind of addresses the worst case scenario fears that we tend to have. Nothing can happen that is not serving me. Nothing that happens, I can see things that happen through the lens of I'm being punished, for my bad deeds, or dark forces are out to get me and all this stuff. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying it's a perspective. And I'm choosing a different perspective, which is that everything that happens is serving me, and in ways that I perhaps cannot see from where I am right now. Now, that's a wonderful belief. I still have, thousands of years of past life memories and ancestral DNA lineage that saw things anyway but that. So what I'm saying is, what's going on now is that we are working out how to release this subconscious memories, tendencies, patterns, beliefs that keep us on this loop or chain of going around and around. I find on the, not so much on the conscious level, but on the below the surface level, this is like a full-time thing. It's a process that's at work all the time. When we get hooked into it, if you're relating to what I'm talking about, the sense of things shifting inside, and the old ways of looking at things no longer feeling right, and perhaps not knowing any other way to look at it, but not, and feeling uncertain or unclear on what to do about this, that would be very apropos. To me, that would be very apropos things to feel, at least some of the time, at this point, because I feel that's what's going on. To me, more and more and more, we are on the verge of a transformation on this planet that has never occurred. And, you know, back when I was young in the 60s, it was going to be entering the Aquarian age and all sunshine and love and peace and all this. And, well, it's not going to happen that way. We have a lot of very, very, very afraid egos on this planet. When I use the term ego, I don't mean people that are on an ego trip. I mean personalities. We have a lot of very afraid egos on this planet. I'm one of them at times. And, you know, it's likely that anyone listening to this at times is one of them, because things are transforming so rapidly and so in places that are unknown and unfamiliar to us, that there are parts of us, especially the disowned, scared parts of us, that really don't know how to handle this. I have a personality, a persona that's called Steve, that has been the protagonist in my journey for all of my life. And what's happening is, with this change, with this shift towards soul consciousness, these egos that have felt responsible and in charge of our individual lives, well, that's not going to be their job anymore. And they don't know any other job. They don't know any other identity. They don't realize that they are one and the same. They are an expression of this soul. They have been walking around feeling independent from everyone else, and even from the so-called higher self. You know, here I am, higher self is out there somewhere doing all this stuff to me, and whatever the version of it is. And that's changing. And for, I think I've said it on here before about the thing that came to me a while ago about because the symbol all my life for this kind of transformation has been caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. And it's a very good symbol for the transformation. And I just read, somebody wrote a long thing on Facebook just the other day about this with some details of what happens. That caterpillar literally is liquefied in that cocoon. There's some kind of chemical reaction that goes on and the thing melts down. And now, if you're that caterpillar and you're melting down and you had a conscious awareness, you might feel pretty uncomfortable in that place. How do you know what's happening? How do you know that you're in the process of turning into a butterfly? You don't. All you know is you are who you have been. How you have known yourself is being taken away from you. That would be the experience from the perspective of the caterpillar. It's being taken away from you by some force that you can't see and don't understand. But there's this larger process going on. You know, the thing that came to me a few months ago, and I'll say it here because I like it and I think it's really valuable, but you know, now I see even a perspective beyond that. But when it first came to me, it was, I've been hearing about caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly all my life. But what no one ever told me before is when the caterpillar is in that cocoon, it is screaming at God. Now think about, because I'm sure that many people that will be listening to this talk are involved in their own inner transformation. And think of the times, perhaps you're not screaming at God a lot, but in terms of questioning God or really wanting to know what is going on. You know, am I losing my mind? Am I crazy? Why is it that all this stuff I've been doing all my life no longer works and no longer has appeal to me? What's going on? Those are questions you can toss up to God or your guides or soul, and they're very, very valid. And that's a big part of why I talk about this stuff, because very few of us were ever taught this perspective. I wasn't. And it's going on, it's happening to a lot of people, and we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know what it is. There's not, at this point, a lot of people that you can, most people don't have a lot of people in their life that if they talk about what I'm talking about to somebody else, that the somebody else is going to have any idea what they're talking about. This is an experience you have to go through. And I calling it a waking up. Because to me, what's happening is the gap, the soul is drawing in. We used to think we were going to like meditate enough and some fine day, be released from this, all this painful stuff. And lo and behold, the reality is more like the soul, divinity, life, actually wants to permeate Earth with higher vibration energies, more loving, more caring, more aware, more conscious. But that's actually what's happening. We're actually going up in the sense of awareness, not physical up. And this is the explanation to me of all the craziness that appears to be going on outside. I think I've mentioned before, I was a lifelong news junkie, and someone suggested to me earlier this year that I take a 2-week news fast because it was affecting, because what I was ingesting of news was affecting my awareness in ways I didn't realize. And I discovered during that 2 weeks how addicted I was to the stimulus of all this stuff. And I basically have just stopped. I might look at something for 10, 15 minutes a week, just the most basic headlines. Why? Because I realize what's on the news is not the real news. And I don't mean by that it's fake news, but the really dramatic news that's going on this planet is the up-leveling of the consciousness and awareness that's going on the planet. And at this point, you're not seeing very much of that on TV or in traditional newspapers. I've had to go through, we need to take action, we need to express our opinion and all that. And we do. If people feel called to that, go for it. It's necessary. But we're changing in deeper ways that have more long-lasting effects. I have realized that me getting into better relationship with myself, by better, I mean more loving, more accepting, more understanding, more holding space for all the parts of me that I have felt that nobody understands, nobody sees, nobody really cares about, all that. And looking externally, being very Libran, looking externally, trying to find a person or people that can supply this. And coming to realize it starts within myself. And it's not just the myself that I know as Steve, but my higher self, my soul, my connection to the universe, to guides, to beings that are simply supporting the transformation that's on Earth, that are so thrilled and happy that anybody that's expressing any interest in adding to participating in this waking up that's going on the planet, that they just pour love, support, energy, wisdom into anyone and everyone who is even in fleeting moments of wanting to understand and wanting to help and wanting to assist. It's profound. I am clear, and I was not a person that saw things this way. I am clear we are on the threshold of a whole different planet, one that we will feel a lot more aligned with. And in fact, that for many of us, the reason we feel so out of alignment and disconnected from so much of what goes on here is because there's a large group of souls that literally came here who already were in awareness of the kind of consciousness that I'm talking about, that came down here to put their feet on the ground to help ground the changes that are coming. And to me, there's more and more souls with, as these changes come closer, there's more and more souls in the generations and the people that are coming now that are more aware of these things. And each generation is going to bring it closer and closer to that. I'm not talking, we will see changes in 10 to 20 years. I'm not talking about the entire planet. I think it's going to get more intense before it really starts settling down, and it may be hundreds of years. But I am clear now, this is the world that we are moving towards. And that more and more becomes my focus, not thinking about I wonder what it's going to be in 500 years, but what am I doing right now, each moment, each breath, each day, to help ground that reality? And the place it most needs to be grounded is inside of me. The greatest contribution I can make to a different world and a more loving world is to become more loving inside myself, with myself. What else did I say here? Okay, yeah. One of the, we as particularly sensitive people generally have a lot of trauma. We are born with a lot of trauma. And in a lot of ways, you could say pretty much everybody on earth is born with a lot of trauma. Sensitive people definitely are born with a lot of trauma, and we have more capacity to understand that. A whole lot of the shifting and changing that is going on in me is what I would call a calming of my nervous system, a deepening into that everything that's going on is needed, necessary, and exactly as it is intended to be at this time, that nothing bad or wrong is going on. And I mean by this, and I'm not going to get into it, but even the activities that are going on politically now that, will drive, let's just say a couple of years ago, I would have a very different perspective than I do right now. But even them, in their own way, in some way, shape, or form, are part of this waking up. It's a temporary phase that we have to go through. And it's not to be as concerned about the details because they're going to work themselves out. And yes, ugly things are going to occur. And yes, unfortunate things are going to occur. And it's also true that anybody that is who is affected directly by these things is a soul experience that they require. It's not bad karma. It's not some kind of punishment. For reasons we may not be able to see, their soul learns and grows from what they're going through. Maybe they're going to have, maybe the experiences that children are having that are really atrocious as a result of all this is going to motivate them as they grow up to be part of movement and change so that this stuff just stops happening. And I in no way mean by that to excuse what's going on or dismiss it or in any way. I'm just saying I'm realizing there's a much bigger picture that goes on all the time. And life is moving towards awakeness. And the increase in unconsciousness that we are likely to see is part of the movement towards awakeness, as those who are so freaked out within themselves to just let go and deal with their own inner stuff. And, you know, what's going to come down to for a lot of people, the need to forgive themselves. I'm talking in the long run here. The need to forgive themselves for behaviors they will begin to see as utterly atrocious and despicable that they engaged in. And they're going to need a lot of holding and compassion in order to be able to make that shift whenever it occurs within their soul. It may not be in this lifetime. But we are all definitely in this together. We may not see how we're in it together. And there's a lot of the in it together I don't like. One of the most amazing things I have been learning is being in Weve doesn't mean you have to like everything. I can detest things. I can still see them as part of the whole. I can know on some level this has a meaning and a purpose that I don't understand, but the fact that it's happening means it's part of something that needs to happen. And I can hold space. I don't understand it. I don't want to be part of it. I don't agree with it, and it's happening. So I'm more and more moving to supporting, starting with myself, the beautiful, wonderful, amazing movement I see going on towards growth in whatever form it's occurring. And I add to this that this also means we needing to change our relationship, what I will call with our shadow selves, our shadow parts. So I find them in me. I mean, we all have hurt parts who have, those parts have some desires that are completely at odds with what the outer persona passionately and definitely wants to be and wants to stand for. And we have disowned these parts. They come down to parts that are hurt. To ground this, to give an example. So I was labeled as a child. I was the angry child. I was introduced to, relatives, friends, all this, the angry child. So I was angry. I didn't know what I was angry about, but I was angry. So being angry got me rejected. So you can see from that, I don't particularly want to exhibit anger, with good reason based on my past experiences. As I've grown, I've realized there was no anger in my house. Nobody's not angry ever. Anger was repressed in my house. So in a way, I was acting out the unacknowledged anger that was in the field, in the emotional field in my house. but I was made the scapegoat. It wasn't put as we feel angry and we're not going to go there. It's like this kid is showing up being angry, the very thing we don't want to be. So we're going to try to suppress him, stop this, push it down, because we don't want to deal with our own. But this left the imprint on me of being judged. And so even as an adult, I have difficulty, owning that I'm angry. Now I'm learning about this. And I'm, in other words, I'm learning that my anger had some validity behind it. It wasn't happy about things that were going on. Kid didn't know how to talk about this. I'm giving this as an example because we all have places inside that we are ashamed of. We push away from. Maybe I'm a really big advocate. I don't know, a really overt example of it is there's the religious kind of people that are like extremely anti-gay that wind up that they've been, guys that have been seeing 14-year-old boys, this kind of thing, because of the shame they feel about the desires. That's an extreme case, but I feel most of us have places where we have our own version of this in much less overt forms. And we may not act them out at all, but we still have places where we're not comfortable with some of the places we feel. And what I'm seeing is we have learned to judge these places, and part of this healing is to stop judging them and to start making friends with them. And it starts with, I'm sorry that for all this time I have been ignoring you and kicking you out and making you wrong. And, please tell me if it's anger, please tell me what you're angry about. If it's fear, please tell me what you're afraid of. If it's, say, jealousy, what are you jealous about? What is your fear? Why are you feeling these things? We don't understand what these parts want, and we've been judged for having them. And we want them to be able to come out of the shadow and become full parts of me, my personality, my persona, my soul. They've been kicked out by the judgments of friends, family, and others. And now, in order for me to be able to accept places like that I see in other people and not be judging them, I can't do that if I'm holding those kind of judgments on myself. It's not possible. So I can come to terms with myself, have compassion for myself, and at that point, I can then actually truly have compassion for other people who are struggling with similar things because they feel so bad about themselves, because that's what they've learned. So this really starts with holding space for ourselves. So to tie this back, there's one other thing that actually I wanted to bring up because suddenly got interested in a couple of hours ago, which is, I was like, when does Pluto enter Aquarius? Because I didn't really know. So I played around with the software, and I find the first entrance of Pluto in Aquarius is on March 23rd, 2023. Which I found interesting that it's on the 23rd in a year that's 23. But I feel like there's going to be huge, that's like 3.5 years. And before that time, we're having Pluto return of USA. And of course, in January, we're having the exact conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. The amount of change that is going to be going on in the next, call it 10 years, is just unbelievable. And it's all part of the program. And I want to put this thought out this way because, again, sensitive spiritual people tend to go to the thought of, oh my God, I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to, I really want to be doing my work, all that. This is what I say, you are. You are, you are, you are. You will not miss this. For a lot of us, this is a key period that we came to live through, and everything before this has been preparation. You will not miss this, and you will be doing the best you possibly can, whatever it looks like to you, and however much in hindsight you feel like I could have, would have, should have done this differently. The way you did it is the way you learned that you could do it differently. You didn't know that, and that is okay. This is what we're stepping into. And so to tie this briefly back to astrology, because to me, as all of what I've been speaking about is growing inside of me, is very much affecting the way that I interpret charts. Because I look at people now, especially people that are interested in having astrology readings, because that itself indicates a certain amount of self-awareness, especially if they want an evolutionary astrology reading, that those people themselves have some role to play in all the changes that are going on. And so I increasingly look at charts from that perspective, try to help them understand that these vast changes are going on. A lot of the uncertainty, unknowing, weirdness, feeling strange, not knowing what to do, loss of meaning, and things that have been of importance to them, and all this is part of the waking up process. I'm also meeting increasing numbers of people who are at various levels of being aware that this is going on. And I'm finding that is happening naturally. And those are to me, our soul companions along this journey. I am in the midst of this process. I'm not sitting here saying, yes, I know all this and, I've done this. It's a living thing that's going on inside of me. I am changing day by day by day at a rate that I feel is faster than I have ever changed before. And it's not always comfortable. And it's also, to me, an amazing, incredible opportunity and a statement of how I feel about myself and life and everything that's going on here on this planet. To be supportive of people who have the courage, because it takes a lot of courage to go through these changes. Do we have any questions, Linda?
Well, we can ask our audience here in the Zoom meeting. Any questions? Okay, well, I've got one. So we're going along as you're saying, and then suddenly some unexpected event happens, and it's kind of like it's one step forward, two steps back. Is that right? Or was it two steps forward, one step back?
Let's hope to God. Let's hope to God it's two steps forward and one
exactly,
step
back. Yeah. And so this shocking thing happens, and it takes you back to other dynamics. Are these dynamics, even more unconscious?
I would say yes, but I want to word it a little differently because that can easily be taken by somebody in a judgmental way. In other words, as if unconscious is bad. The way that I've seen that the cycles work, in fact, what was I looking at? I want to go back to my Pluto and entering Aquarius for one moment, because after I first found that, I then noticed that Pluto is actually squaring the nodes when it goes into Aquarius. I mean, that's amazing to me. I bring this up because 2 steps forward, 1 step back, to me, is in a way the symbol of skipped steps, EA skipped steps. It's not the only time there's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But what I would say is we have to we take the 2 steps forward and we're brought to places that we haven't experienced before. And then we need to take this back to the me that I know myself as, the good old Steve. Because I can't have one part of me running ahead of the pack of the other parts of me. The whole package needs to be integrated. So when we're having what we call 1 step back, a lot of the time it's a time to take the time to integrate, to slow down, almost take a time out of life, allow yourself a time out of life to stop doing and integrate. And this is a very natural part of the cycle. Jeffrey used to talk about, he probably still does, oscillating, that when change is at hand, that there's an increasing rate of oscillation between the old and the new, the old and the new, the old and the new, the old and the new. Because we're basically releasing old patterns and integrating new patterns, old beliefs, old ways of doing things, old identities. So we're integrating. That's, in other words, 2 steps forward, 1 step back does not mean that we're regressing. It means that we're integrating. And it's only a matter of time. We need to give those parts of ourselves time to catch up. In fact, one saying that has been really helpful lately is that to only move forward at the speed of the slowest part of yourself. Meaning we have some parts that are raring to go and other parts that are raring to stay. And we need to have a dialogue, literally, between those parts, where the parts that are not quite ready to move forward don't feel like they're being dumped on by the parts that are impatient, but that we're all in this together. And the parts that are more capable of moving ahead hold space for the parts that are not quite ready yet. That's the integration I'm talking about.
Thanks, Steve. Jody, go ahead with your question.
Hi, Steve. I'm glad I was able to catch you live again. Being that I have, you just mentioned now that all of this would be squaring the nodes. I didn't even give that a thought. But being that I have 5 planets in Aquarius in the 11th house, and with this now, and my North Node is in Cancer, it becomes rather ominous, but in an almost exciting way. So am I correct to imagine that everything that's happening in Capricorn is more about us, our whole foundation being shifted, so that now we can come out in Aquarius in a different way? Is that kind of where we're going?
Yes, I would say yes. I would look at the Pluto in Capricorn, and particularly when Saturn gets, well, it's involved now, but when it really gets close in January, is that the structure that we know is going to break down, crumble, simply because it has served its purpose. You know, we can look at it. I don't like making predictions, but let's say we have a structure on this planet. I'll get to you, your personal, in just a moment, Jody. We have a structure on this planet called capitalism, and it did a lot of, it caused some problems, but it did a lot of good for a lot of people for a very long time. And in a lot of ways, it seems like it's getting outmoded. So when the Pluto and Saturn, Capricorn, this affects everything. It affects individuals. It affects the world. It affects the societies. It affects the structure of families, of everything is going to be breaking down. Because you can look at this as a death rebirth process. And this part, Jody, is, definitely applies to you. There's a death rebirth process. That's how life works. Stuff shows up. It has its purpose in our evolving. And at a certain point, we've learned what is there, what we can from that particular structure or way of organizing stuff, societies, families. And then we need something new because we're not getting the growth anymore from the way it is, but we don't know any other way. So it literally has to crumble. And the parts of us that have, if you have 5 planets in Aquarius, you have typically had trauma, fair amount of trauma in that past. And so thinking about great change again, it's like, uh-oh, now it's going to happen. And so a good way to put it is, whatever is going to be leaving your life is for your benefit. And part of what can be leaving your life is trepidation about the change. You will feel it, but when you see that what comes in its place is, over time, is an improvement, you start to have the experience like, oh, this was really a good thing. I didn't feel it that way, and that's okay that you didn't feel it that way. But when you said it feels exciting, that's what I'm talking about. Because there's an element in it that will be very exciting. It can be a release from a lot of patterns that have been around for a long time. And you're going to go through some discomfort with that. I know one thing I wanted to say is that about grieving or grief, because we're going to be letting go of large parts, or how did I put it? I heard somebody say it really well, which is, I think I'm letting go, but actually I'm the one who's being let go. I'm not the originator of it. Life bigger than me is removing stuff. And the grieving that may come up from the change, and it can be irrational, but it's like when you see chunks of one's whole life kind of fading away, life is different now than it was 30 and 40 years ago. There can be some sadness for that. It's like we had great experiences. But it's an honoring of what has been, and where we want to move into is, when we can, to feel, I don't know if we need to feel excited, but accepting that, okay, everything is starting to change, and that change can only be for my good, for my benefit. I'm not going to know, it's going to take me a while for things to settle down where I have any idea what I'm supposed to do with this, and that's okay. I'm not supposed to know, and life is going to show me. And it gives me the opportunity to deal with the parts of me that are afraid and hold space for them, and don't throw them out of the room. You shouldn't be afraid. Well, they should be afraid. But you can hold them, and they can experience that as it works out, that there was nothing really to be afraid of. But they didn't know that. This is so about honoring everything about the way that we are, that it's amazing. And most of us need to learn that because it's not the way we have been taught. It's not the way our body, our organisms, our nervous systems respond at this point. So it seems like we want to wind down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I thank you, all of you, for participating in this. And I will be, thank you, Julia. And I'll be back talking on different versions of this from different angles for probably the foreseeable future. And so thank you all for joining. Thank you, Linda, for putting all this together, which is truly amazing.
Okay, Steve, thank you once again for an incredible meeting. Would you all please thank Steve Wolfson, everyone?
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.